never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dungeon Master of None. I'm Dungeon Master Rob. It's just me today, and we have a special guest. I'm interviewing a friend of mine and player, designer, all-around mensch. Andy, hello, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How would you, you and I have played games together for a while, and we talk game design a bunch. You are a designer in many senses of the word, but how would you describe sort of contextually, are you a game designer, RPG designer?
I'm primarily a designer of books and interfaces, and then only by the grace of God am I a designer of games as well.
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to have you on anyway, but recently you have designed a couple of games, one full game and 95% of a second game, something along those lines.
Yeah, the barometer that tracks the design of that game goes way up and then way back down, depending on whether I'm restarting or not. But yes.
Yeah. You and I have had a lot of conversations about game design, and I always enjoy picking your brain. And I want to talk to you about what you're working on, or what you've been working on, and you've got Echo of Ghosts, which we'll get to, which is a really neat 2-pager, and then Gun Magic Techno Pop. Is that the current title?
That remains the current title.
I like it. I'm happy to keep calling it that, but yeah. Which is longer and in varying degrees of being finished. But one of the things that I really like about talking with you about this stuff, Andy, is that you come from it from like an entirely different tradition than me in two ways, right? You're a designer, visual interfaces, like you said, layout, but also you didn't start playing tabletop with D&D.
Right.
That's right. What did you start with?
Oh God. My first memory of playing games, tabletop games, is Paranoia. I would have been, 12, 13, 12, like the ideal age for that game.
Perfect age. Yeah.
And had absolutely no idea what I was doing, but found the sort of open-ended nature of not knowing what I was doing, like so evocative and interesting. I don't actually remember how to play Paranoia, but the things that it got into my blood in ways that were about, thinking back, in ways that were about experience over mechanics, experience over procedure, maybe. Vibe is so heavy,
yep.
Right there. And I think back on those games, and it's very very juvenile what that vibe was, but the vibe was the thing that I entered into. And D&D, when I did play it on occasion later on, I found very it wasn't the same kind of game in some ways than the games that lived in my head, and the games that I was playing in my head, because for a while I did not have a game group. I thought of games and I played them myself.
Right.
Theater of the mind.
The curse of the imaginative child. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
No, and that's interesting. And this, you and I have talked about this, and Matt and I have talked about this. And I think that if they're not, two distinct traditions precisely of tabletop, there's two, I guess, axes, two poles. And one is a more experiential, more vibes based, more storytelling games, right? And then the other is, has its DNA in wargaming, and that's your D&Ds and whatnot. And I go back and forth on are these things irreconcilable? Are they even part of the same? Are they even the same game? Right? Are we even talking about the same thing? Like when I say tabletop role-playing games and I'm thinking of D&D, and somebody else says that and they're thinking of Powered by the Apocalypse. I don't know that I have an answer to this, but I find that this is something that the more that I think about game design, the more that I wonder about, and the things that, or the games that you have designed and the ones that you talk to me about and the ideas you bring up are all very, they do sort of like center on vibes and on story and on feel. That's not to say that your mechanics are not solid. They're always solid,
Yeah,
but like
no.
you are clearly trying to cultivate a feel. And I think that's interesting, but I think that's very hard. I mean, how do
God, it
you,
feels so much easier to me.
does it feel easier to you?
I'll
Tell
be
me
dead
about that.
honest.
Tell me about that.
I'll be having tried to like think about
Mechanics. Yeah.
mechanics that. So okay, this is going to diverge a little bit, but
Please.
as
Please do.
as a designer, as you know, to like my day job and education and past 20 years of my life have been about system design of one sort or another. Systems like interactive systems that have a large emphasis on like feedback, or print systems that have an emphasis on um, consistent application of things that over time, like building a system that can flexibly adapt to anything that gets thrown at it. When it came to like apply that thinking to games, I found it so much harder than in my work. I found that the like nature of a game system, because it is a shared experience among a number of people sitting at a table together who have to like understand it all in the same way, like doing that kind of building a system that can then be like explained in a way that everyone understands and like and works the same way for everyone in their mind and sort of at the table, is an incredible challenge. It genuinely, I think it's like the hardest system challenge I've like tried to wrestle with. Whereas like designing by vibes is like, I don't know, like I got into this through stories and storytelling, and I'm a failed, my youthful passions of like comics and movies, and these are things that I can't produce myself. I'm like a decent illustrator, but I'm not a capable comic artist, and I certainly lack the like capability of producing a movie or a TV show. Like a game, it is almost as close as it gets towards creating a vibe that can then be disseminated, and to do so in a way that is like experienced through play rather than just sort of like tediously the thing. Maybe if I was a different person, I'd write a book, right? But that's a lot of work, man.
As the failed, or I don't know, in progress novelist part of this equation, I know exactly what you mean, right? Honestly, TTRPGs seem like designing and writing one seems like a nice, I don't know, side, a appetizer compared to trying to like write and complete a book. But
because the book, you have to like every it's not just the framework, it is it's the everything. The book is played. The book plays itself in the reading.
Yes,
right?
That's right. Yeah.
Whereas like the game is like created by the players. So if you can create the like structure, or within which like the game, the like story comes to life, like that's the job. And it feels like cheating in some ways. It does. It feels like cheating. It feels like I'm writing a book, but I'm not doing the tedious work. I'm like putting out big tent poles, and like now you guys do the rest.
Yeah, you're basically just providing bullet points, and then like tell your own story. You've just sort of placed a framework there. It's not it's not easy, but it definitely feels like a different kind of challenge than creating something of your own from start to finish. I mean, this is something that I've been thinking about just a lot. That's why I like tabletop, and why I think it's such an interesting medium. Like I love to play, like I enjoy it, but like the more that I think about it, the more I think it's so interesting, because it is transformed by the players, right? And they can do a lot of work for you. And I think this is both like a good and a bad thing. I hate to, constantly use it as a punching bag, but like D&D is kind of a design mess. It's not in its current iteration all that particularly good at anything, but players have, with, gumption and staples and duct tape, like transformed it into all manner of like interesting story, right? Which is and exciting dynamic play, which is what what it's all about. My constant contention is that it would be easier and better with other systems, but like that is genuinely like sort of like an interesting thing. And looking back on like the history of tabletop, it was, I mean, this is the origin of the hobby, right? Is like, transforming, horrible nerd wargaming into something that could tell like a bit of a story. And I think that's very, very interesting. And the designers that I like that are doing interesting things in tabletop are aware of that and leaning into it, which kind of brings me to one of my other questions for you, which was, what are your, like you mentioned paranoia, but like, what are your inspirations for tabletop gaming? Like I said, we come from sort of like different traditions. We've played a lot of the same games now, but like, what's exciting and interesting for you, and wants you makes you want to create? And this doesn't have to be just tabletop. Like, what sorts of media do you enjoy that drives you towards this?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, those are sort of two separate questions.
Yeah, maybe that should be two. Maybe we should just do sort of fiction or media inspirations and then tabletop. But
sure,
both things are relevant, I think.
The thing that I like about that inspires me in fiction and media to that has me like feel creative and feel inspired to think about games is things that are a little bit slippery in genre, which is in some ways why I think of this in game terms, because like I've played a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games, games where your character has a like set of triggers that when they come up in the fiction, you're meant to like sort of roll or you're given certain opportunities. They're a bit like actions, they're these moves that you have. But those are often described as Powered by the Apocalypse games as ways of creating new works of genre fiction, because they're so like you play a certain kind of character, and that certain kind of character has these certain kind of moves, and you're more or less familiar with what that kind of the tropes of those characters are, and the moves lean into those tropes. That's not all that it does, but that's often what Powered by the Apocalypse lends itself to, and that can be great. But the things that tend to like animate me are things that are a little bit more like slippery in terms of genre. They don't really feel like one genre or another. The inspiration for Gun Magic Technopop is primarily like these Vertigo comics in the 1990s, and in particular this comic called The Invisibles by Grant Morrison, which was it had a kind of like it had a way of like refusing to be too much of one thing or another in terms of its influence and the way that it like plays out. It described itself, or actually this writer, God, what's his name? Ken Wolk, I think. I should check that. But a writer described it as being it's like dressed up in action adventure drag. And I really like that concept. Like I like the way that like you would wear one set of clothes on top of another set of clothes, and like, so my games are often, as I'm designing them or thinking about them or getting excited about them, are often sort of about the way that we take on these fictional like identities and can kind of shed them and pick up other, that they're a little bit like, I like thinking about playing characters that are not entrenched in one trope, but instead move between these kind of positions. So I like the fiction that gets me excited about this stuff is stuff that tends to be like when The Matrix first came out. At this point, The Matrix is so like entrenched in sort of pop culture conscious that it like you put somebody in like a black trench coat with a gun and it's like, oh right, it's The Matrix.
Right. Yeah.
But when it came out, it had this like feeling of being in between all these different spaces. It was.
It was
I mean,
it was like a God. This is terrible. There's like a TV tropes word for it, but like it's a genre defining, right? Like it
right.
invented sort of like its own genre, and it's it's science fiction, it's cyberpunk ish, but like the Matrix is really its own, like it sort of like transcends that, and yeah, it seems familiar now because it was so formative, but yeah, at the time it was really like blending a bunch of things together.
And there's something about that like mashup of idea and genre that has always appealed to me in culture, both in terms of consuming it and I guess making it. Um, that like I have no desire to make something. I said that like there's this comic that was the like inspiration behind this work I'm doing, but like I have no desire to build something in that IP.
Right.
I don't want to I don't want to recreate a thing. I don't think I could recreate a thing.
Right. You're not making Invisibles, or the Invisibles the game, right? You're
Right.
not interested in doing that. Yeah.
Right. And I think because I'm not interested in doing it kind of across the board, my inspiration is always a little bit more about like feeling and mood than it is about like actual reference points. Yeah. And then in terms of what I'm like interested in tabletop, it's very similar actually in terms of my inspiration in tabletop games. Like I really like these games that feel to me somewhere in between narrative oriented and OSR adventure oriented. There's a designer named Aaron King who has a game called Patchwork World, which I find like just so cool. In that it is full of moves, these like Powered by the Apocalypse moves, but it's not. They're like all. It is very much like one person's a particular like feeling that one person is trying to like evoke without anchoring it in any one genre or trope. The moves are like all about idiosyncrasies of your characters that I wish I had in front of me, like about the nature of your past, or they're just very, very specific. But like that's the game. The game is that you pick a few moves. And then otherwise the game is pretty like open-ended. There's no like it's not structured the way that often like Blades in the Dark style games where there's like phases of operation are very
Right.
structured.
Right.
It's not like super crunchy the way that like an OSR game, it's not super crunchy, but like it's very much like here's a set of numbers and now go forth. It sort of like floats in between those things.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been, I can't help it. I've always wanted to sort of like synthesize um, ideas and moods, maybe more than like entrenchment, like firmly work within one of them.
I I love that, and something that I've really come to enjoy about tabletop. I don't know, the more I play, the more I grow and think about it. Is I actually think it's like a really interesting tool for deconstructing like tropes and genre. Like I think that like the very like something like Savage Worlds, like Deadlands, is like it's a Western, it's an extremely Western themed game. It's both the mechanics and sort of like the flavor are like you're playing a Western, but like and maybe this is too big brained of me and I can't like stop thinking this way, but like the very act of doing that encourages you to sort of think about and uh transgress, deconstruct, really play with that genre. I think it makes it really, really interesting if you're the kind of person who likes to do that. And it's the same for heist games. Like I love a heist game and I love to just sort of like play a heist straight, but like then you're thinking about heists and you start to see heists everywhere, or you start to think about like how would you um how would you invert a heist? How can you make a heist like more than a heist? What you start to like recognize these patterns in media, and that's like these things are, in my opinion, great. Like I love to watch a movie or a TV show or read a book that like nails sort of like a genre moment perfectly, that even if it plays it completely straight. I love a well executed heist. I love a Western that feels like a Western. I love a noir that feels like a noir. But like what's cool about tabletop, because and I think a lot of the more popular vibes-based games is they are built with a genre in mind, or they're built with a specific type of play in mind, and I think that's good. And I also think that what's cool about it is that by like exposing it to a bunch of players, like we were talking about before, it is transformed, and it often ends up resulting in like really interesting forms of play or exploration of those genres, or something kicks out of that, like somebody designs based on that original game, but like what if it's like this but with this twist, which is a little bit like Echo of Ghosts. We'll get to that in a minute, but like this is what I think is so interesting about what you said about, you know, about genre and about, you know, games and media that mix them together or play with the boundaries.
There's also something that happens, I think, when a player sits down to play a game and isn't intimately familiar with playing that genre already, hasn't already internalized all of the like ways that you might, you know, you might even have seen a million heist movies, but there's something in the moment of playing the game out where you're not like sort of thinking you're ready to like take on certain roles of the heist. You're sort of like feeling your way into the character and into the space. That's awkward. And I think that awkwardness is really interesting. Like that awkwardness leads to a lot of really interesting moments in role play, because you're not, this goes back to the like, you know, we're making a framework for people to create within rather than like writing the thing. I'm not the author who like has the time to sit back and think like, okay, what would this character do? There's like, instead I'm sort of in the moment, like um in the moment understanding or like trying to find solid ground, because sometimes it's hard to like begin play in a new kind of context or mood or space or genre. Like those moments where you're doing sort of the wrong thing in the
Yes.
genre, I love what that leads to
Yes.
at the table. When, you know, like it's a heist and somebody like is like trying to get a hold of their character and it's like, okay, I'm gonna play my character like super confident, and like that leads into like just, oh wait, this isn't quite a heist, this is more of like a Coen Brothers movie
Right.
where like you're not doing the right thing, you're doing the wrong thing at the right time.
This is now a caper. It's a it's a yeah, a comedy of errors. You know, this is one of the things that one reason why I haven't fully abandoned like D&D style play or D20 play, and that is because I have, you know, almost exclusively played with people in the past 5 or 6 years who are not coming to the table with genre expectations and are doing exactly what you're describing. They're playing it wrong, and that's where you get like that's a joke. There's no way to play wrong, but like they're doing the thing where they like, you know, they like want to befriend the goblins, or instead of you know, doing the quest they've been given, they like want to set up a merchant stall, and you know, and this is, again, it's this is, I guess, like where I get like mixed up, because I want the system to work with the game, and I want it to encourage play, and I want it to facilitate play, but also there's something very, very entertaining about just letting people bounce off of it and rattle around and do their own thing with it. I'm I lately I have been comparing role-playing games to sports a lot in my mind, because you know, I think that there is sort of like an important parallel, but like uh rugby, football, American football, soccer, um Irish football or Gaelic football, Australian rules. These are all offshoots of the same general sport. Like these are all like, you know, ball goes down the field games. But over time, you know, people decided that they liked playing that general concept in different ways, and it created a bunch of like cool but very, very distinct forms of play. And so I you know, me personally as a GM and as somebody who's trying to design games, I'm like, I want this game to have rules that work and function and are easy to understand and facilitate play. But there's also a part of me that's like, just make a thing and like see what people do with it.
Yeah, I mean, the make a thing and see what people do with it is like, this kind of goes back to where I think about vibes in games. Like, kind of at the end of the day, you could have a coin flip for any encounter, any like
right
conflict resolution.
Yes.
And like everything else is about like, how do you encourage a certain kind of like fun to be had? I mean, obviously that's like really reductive, and it's probably kind of boring unless you're in the most like LARPy of sort of mindsets. But like, the more open space there is, the more you are sort of saying, yeah, let's build a stall. Let's sort of do whatever. Let's like, yeah, let's start a bar. And then you're just sort of like talking it out. One of the things that Powered by the Apocalypse games do is like they put up guardrails for that stuff. Like, it's not necessarily the intent, but like when your moves for your character are so like trope oriented, it helps, and I do think this helps. It helps players not have those moments of like, what do I do? What would my character do here? What your character does here is like probably lean into one of these sort of like ways of operating. That's not really how like you're quote unquote supposed to think of Powered by the Apocalypse. The idea is that like you tell a story and the moves are triggered by the story. You just tell the story, and the GM's deal is to be like, oh, it sounds like what you're doing is this in the fiction, you know, and then you sort of like look down and you're like, ah. But in practice, I think people have their like sheets in front of them and they think about like, oh, these are this is how I operate. Whereas a totally open-ended game where it's like, to resolve a conflict or to resolve a question, flip a coin, the space, the design space, not the design space, the like play space, the agency in the mind, like what is in front of me and what can I do is so much more wide open and so much less sort of guided. That seems to be like part of the DNA of those of a really open-ended game, is that anything can happen. And almost it's like historical happenstance that what tends to happen is that you're in a dungeon. What tends to happen is that you're looking for treasure.
Yes, right. That's just how it shook out.
How it evolved, yeah.
Yeah. This is something that again, now we're sort of like, well, we're not, there's nothing to diverge from. There's no rules. I can do whatever I want. But like it's something that I've been really like rattling around in my head a lot is like, I think like if there's no wrong way to play a tabletop role-playing game. There's no like wrong way to run it, I guess. Actually, that's not true. There's probably wrong ways, but for the most part, if you're having fun, that's okay. But like the thing that I think, I guess like a problem that I have identified that I think that is something that should be solved by the game in question is players should never not know what to do. Like the thing is like, I think a very important word in the phrase tabletop role-playing game is game, right? So like if you put any, most like 5-year-olds on a field and say play soccer, they don't have any, maybe not 5, let's say 7. They know how to play soccer. They know what they are supposed to do. They might get the rules wrong. They might do something weird, but like they know what to do. Same for like Monopoly, right? Like you might need to read the rule book, but like everybody knows what they're supposed to do. Your turn doesn't come around and you're like, what do I do? And obviously what's great about tabletop role-playing games is that you have the agency and the freedom to do more than just pass, go, or, kick the ball down the field. But, and that is a key and essential part of it. But like, I think it is an issue that a lot of games are either too constrained or too open-ended. I'm doing dialectics here. I feel like we gotta, I think the ideal is in the middle, right? People should be able to sit down and know what to do, but also like feel the freedom to have agency and have choice. And there are a lot of games that I like that do a good job of this, but I have yet to find one that like really like you can just sit down. You'll never be able to just like pick up a role-playing game the way you can Monopoly. But I do think that because of sort of the historical forces and the design ideas that inform modern tabletop, that like it still is a little bit too difficult to get to that point with most players, especially complete newcomers to the genre.
I mean, I think you've identified like a really interesting and important problem that I think a lot about in my other work, which is like onboarding. Like, what does it mean to encounter something with only the least amount of context and go from being someone who you go from being confused to being like capable to potentially over time being like empowered. And that kind of onboarding of games is something that we just don't do much of in most games. I've read a lot of games at this point. And there's not many games that spend time thinking about like, how do you teach this game to somebody? Usually it is like a brick ton of like of play and rules, and it's just like you're going to figure it out and then you're going to disseminate it. I think there's a lot of opportunity with games to think about like one thing. I have like a list of things that I just like keep kicking around, and one of them is like, all right, what if the game started with like 3 distinct episodes and they each like scaffold up the rule set. So in the first like time you play it, here's all you have to do. This is all you need to think about. And the second time you play it, you're introducing this somewhat larger view of how this game is played in the picture. And then the third time it's like much more open-ended and you're sort of free to like explore and push against it and so forth. Video games obviously do a lot of this. Tabletop role-playing does virtually none. And I do think that that is a challenge to bringing people into the medium and to like growing the medium, is that it is so dependent on someone else who's already mastered this thing to like bring new people in. Now, there are consequences, positive consequences of that. It means that there's like there's a kind of community and communal approach to this kind of game playing that is like unlike anything else I've encountered. There's a dedication by some people to like internalize and understand rules because they know somebody has to,
right?
Like there's, you make it challenging, and some people some people want that challenge, and it has them become that much more attached to it. But we do a very bad job of making games easy to pick up and play for the first time. The other thought I had is a little bit less about like onboarding for the first time and more about like table expectations and group expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just a lot about like, I think that there are sort of social contracts at play. And at one table that I play with, I would be playing with a group of people who like have played a lot of games, and all they need is like a sheet of paper with what is essentially like a boiled down list of things to keep in mind. And that becomes the basis for an entire like well-structured game in the mind, because they already have internalized all of the like ways of playing games like this. That is not a good way to grow the medium.
No, that's exactly right.
But it's fine for that table. And it encourages experimentation, because it's like, okay, I'm going to build something that is a little less welcoming, but is a little like, I'm we're going to push at the boundaries of a couple things in here, because I know that this is going to be picked up by people who already understand the medium. And I think that's okay. I think that's okay. I don't think that it like is what I want games writ large to be, but it's okay. I definitely would like to be designing games that are much more like you look down and you're like, oh, this is how I play this game. It's like written here for me. I understand my point of entry into it.
I like your video game example a lot. Like if you play something like Zelda or Dark Souls or anything, like it's got a controller, right? Like for the most part, they have a tutorial and it's like press, X to jump, and then, this button to swing your sword, and, this to pick up stuff off the ground. And, you get through that in 5 minutes, but like you are told explicitly with like a prompt on screen, this button does this, and that progresses. Like it's a scaffold. That's what you said. I like that. A scaffold to build sort of like how to play on. And it doesn't give you anywhere near enough to like, master the game, but like it tells you everything that you need to know. And it's interesting because Daggerheart, the Darrington Press Critical Role role-playing game that we've talked about a little bit, it explicitly tries to do this in its starting adventure. It's like, your players should get here and then roll this dice and then explain how this dice resolution works. And then here's, a list of outcomes that you can sort of like read out loud. And I found that very stifling, constricting. It bothered me, and I genuinely, I don't know if that would be good for first time players. It might be, because that is sort of like what we're describing here, right? And it basically hits all of like the main mechanics of the role playing game in this starting adventure. And so like maybe that would be good. Oh, I genuinely, like, I think I said this on the last podcast, but I can't really like put myself in that headspace to understand if that would be more helpful than something that is a little bit less structured. Yeah, I don't have a good answer here, but I think that there is a definite problem in, it's hard to learn games even with like a patient dedicated GM, which is currently kind of the only way to learn games.
Yes. Do you, when you like encountered the Daggerheart like opening adventure and found it stifling, was that to you as a GM, or was that to you in your like player mind how you would experience it?
It was kind of in my player mind, because I was like, you know, if I roll to attack these wolves and I get the sense that my GM is reading from like a list of predetermined outcomes, I'm going to feel like this is like I'm on rails. And that's like a me player mind. This is where I got tripped up, because I'm like, well, I've been a player for a long time. I have certain understandings and expectations. I don't know if this would be entertaining or useful or instructive for an absolute neophyte. I genuinely don't know. I'm curious. I think this is also getting off track a bit, but I think Daggerheart is going to bring in a lot of new players, like a brand new players to the genre. How many remains to be seen. I'm very curious to see what their experience with it is, because if there is one thing about that, well, the current iteration, it is very much designed with absolute newcomers in mind. Whether or not that like onboarding process is the right one, or whether that works, is kind of remains to be seen, because like you said, the tabletop genre has never really done this before. It has never really been interested in new players, to be honest. Like, everything is sort of like written for either you're experienced and transitioning to something new, or you're experienced and like advancing on to the next thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and even the way that it would like not just players, but a new GM. Like I think about some of those early experiences I had trying to play D&D, where everyone at the table was new to it. The DM was new. You call it a DM, I believe. Yes, the DM was new.
We've been trying to make the shift to game master for everything, just like the broad GM category. But yeah, in D&D it's dungeon master. Yeah.
And I remember in that first session, there was this way that the introduction to it felt like a series of texts and boxes. That like, oh, you're going to read this text in the box. And then like, okay, now we pause. And we're like, okay, what do we do now? We read this text in the box. And I think that is generally considered to be like not a great way to learn the game, and not that like exemplary of what the game is. If there were something that were, I haven't read the Daggerheart opening module. I should. I'm super curious. If there were a way to, instead of it being like, here's a pick list, although I love pick lists, and so I'm sort of into like that as a possible approach. If it were like prompts that were like asking the GM in that moment, like, describe the room. How does it smell? What's the sound of their feet as they walk on the floor? Like if there were these sort of like open-ended prompts that had a new game master thinking about the kinds of ways that they will, the skills that they're going to begin building as a GM. Like, how do I make something sort of evocative? How do I like create an NPC that is distinct? Like, here's an NPC. Maybe their name is this. Like, do they do this? Do they do this? And like, it's sort of like, oh, okay, right. So these are training the GM. Maybe what I'm saying is like a learning how to be a GM seems as difficult and important as learning how to be a player. And thinking about how those two things might go hand in hand is really interesting to me.
That's exactly right. And like it's something I'm thinking about all the time. It's why we've done 300 some odd episodes of this podcast
yeah, right.
But no, we obviously haven't solved it. And like, this is an exaggeration, but like, it's kind of my life's work. Like I'm trying to figure out, like, I think like I love being a game master. I have been for 20 years. It's made me it's made me a better writer. It's made me a better, quicker on my feet. It's, I have lots of dear friends that I have made through playing these games. I want other people to feel comfortable doing it. I've had dozens of players over the course of my time as a GM, and I think I know two, who have gone on to be, consistent GMs of their own. And it is intimidating, and you hit on something important, which is like these books, these systems, these role-playing games are trying to do two things at once. They're trying to teach players how to play, but they're also trying to teach game masters how to game master. And sometimes at the same time, sometimes there's a game master section, but like this is to me a really, really interesting, both like writing, design, just systems challenge. And I think I don't know that there's like, I'm positive there is not like a way to do these both at the same time perfectly, but some systems I think do this better than others. And this is definitely like a thing that I am interested in, like working on and poking at, because it's tricky, right? Especially like getting started with any game, any new game is the biggest hurdle. And I don't know that it has to be as hard as it is.
I think I don't know that I've seen it done. I mean, I don't know. I've certainly seen like games that are easier to pick up and run and games that are harder to pick up and run. We talked a little bit about Powered by the Apocalypse and what it does for players in terms of like making players, offering certain like guardrails, or certain, not guardrails exactly, but like characters are inclined towards being certain characters, not just having certain like actions they can take and you fill in the rest, but really being certain characters based on their moves. The other thing that Powered by the Apocalypse games do fairly well is think about the game master as a participant, with a sort of asymmetric rule set, kind of like most of those games. And in fact, most games that I read now have like a set of GM principles to keep in mind when playing the games. And reading those principles for the first time was really like, it wasn't that I hadn't thought of them before. I can't remember, probably like Dungeon World I'm thinking of here, but Blades in the Dark has something similar, I think, where it's like, be a fan of the character.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And like, oh, right. Like that is a good way to encapsulate a lot of the relationship between a GM and a player, that even if the GM is like, you don't know, like, am I meant to be opposing am I the antagonist?
Yes.
Am I the like, all right, I'm a fan of the characters. Like there's ways of boiling it down that I think help set the mind. It doesn't necessarily teach you how to play the game, but it helps set the mind. Then there is, I mean, some games do though, like Dungeon World, which is flawed in some ways, for all of these various reasons actually, but like the GM had moves. You had your own moves, and like when there was a pause in the game, like these were the things that you could do. You could like change the environment. You could like make things, introduce this complication, and I thought that was a really interesting way to think about systematizing being a GM. It's actually not at all the way I play it. Like it goes entirely against how I find natural, like what I find natural about running a game. Yep. But it was an interesting approach.
This is interesting to me, and it's something that I've thought about. I sort of I'm inclined, to sort of like bristle at it, because I'm like, I'm the GM. I have, I need absolute authority to, run this game, or else it's not going to work. But I am becoming more interested in games that systematize parts of being a game master the way that the way that being a player is systematized. You have moves or actions or a framework for what you can do, not just your putting the initiative tracker up and deciding what all the bad guys do and also narrating the action. Like maybe there's more to it than that. This is challenging because I think that it is not what a GM is traditionally thought of as doing. But I do think this is more big brain stuff, but I think the interesting design space, and I think that, I don't know if I'm going to say like the future of TTRPGs is to start treating the GM more like a player and less like a referee, and easier said than done.
So much harder, in fact,
yes.
than the opposite trend of having the GM be entirely a referee,
yes,
who just gets to weigh in,
just
in the moment.
It's just like, yeah, sure, that works. That doesn't. I don't know. This happens next. We are. I want to get to what you've been working on before we run too long. So let's talk about Echo of Ghosts. And do you want to describe the sort of origin of this, because it's a real delight to me, Andy. But I would love for you to tell our listeners how this came to be.
Echo of Ghosts is a hack of another game. It was submitted to a game jam, and by the way, for people who have thought about doing game design and don't know where to start and want something bite size, Itch has a listing of game jams, and often, probably every other month of the year, there's some kind of small TTRPG jam that you could jump in and are very hold in your hand, and I have found a great way to start thinking. But the jam was for Dice Exploder, which is another podcast, and the idea was it's you take a feature, and you use that term loosely, a feature of another game, and you build an entire different game around it. You sort of dive really deep into that one little thing and think about exploding that and making that the entirety of it. So Echo of Ghosts is a hack of a game called Ghost Echo. Ghost Echo is designed by John Harper. It was one of the games that led pretty directly into his design of Blades in the Dark. Very similar vibe in some ways, but it has a unique dice mechanic where you roll dice, and instead of it sort of saying here's the outcome, you then assign those dice. So you assign the dice to, easiest way to think of it is you divide what you're doing into the goal and the danger. The goal is what am I trying to accomplish? I'm trying to steal this motorbike. The danger is what's the worst that could happen even if I was successful, and maybe I get caught. So you roll 2 dice, and then you get to pick, do I want to assign the good dice to, let's say they come up a 6 and a 1. Do I want to assign the good dice to stealing the motorcycle? But I'm also caught because I have a 1 then to assign to get caught. Or do I want it to be the other way around? I don't accomplish my goal, but nothing bad happens. It puts this level of sort of fine-grained control in the hand of the player. The conceit of Ghost Echo was that it's a little bit cool, grimdark, early 2000s tough guy. You're a crew of looters, and you're looting the ghost world, and you're stealing stuff from the ghost world, trying not to get caught, getting back to the human world, always being chased by entities from both. And so for this hack, I wanted to I was struck first by I liked the game. I like the dice system a lot. I love thinking about that dice system. I think it's really successful for a one shot. It's a little bit harder I have found to do over long periods of time, because it's just a lot of mental, it's a burden, in fact, as you play it, to be thinking through that level of dice rolling. It's it slows things down. Great for a one shot, though. I encourage people to play it. And then I was oh, but the thing that I really wanted to get at was this idea that it fucking sucked if you were a ghost and these humans kept coming in and stealing
taking
your stuff.
Yeah,
it's just bullshit. And so I wanted to make the game be about the ghosts from the ghost world who are breaking into the human world to steal their stuff back. And part of that was about trying to figure out what the atmosphere was, what the vibe was, and hitting on the transformative idea that like you couldn't really be killed as a ghost, but the worst thing if you were a ghost would be to the ghost world is beautiful and magical. The human world is gray and terrible, and the worst thing would be to be a human again. Would be to become alive. Ghosts didn't want to become alive, and so the like harm tracker is sort of about your ghostly presence, and you lose your ghostly presence over time depending on how you assign dice, and you can end the game by becoming alive again, and that would suck. But you can take on all the harm you want. You could like lose an arm, you could get a hole blown open in your chest, and all that would do would be like you'd be rolling with increasing disadvantage. So it's sort of like it's a bit slapsticky of a game because of the way that harm works. That's how it tends to get played, is that people lean into the slapstick nature of it.
I mean, there's a lot that's like really fun about this. I like, Ghost Echo, keen eared listeners will recognize the DNA of Blades in the Dark. And I think Blades in the Dark was designed to fix that thing that you were describing where it's hard for long-term play. Blades in the Dark is great for long-term play because Harper made a bunch of smart changes to make it like a little bit better. Ghost Echo is a lot of fun, and it's got a very like early 2000s. it's definitely of its time, but it's a good game, and this dice mechanic has been borrowed for a bunch of things, but I do like, I think this inversion is really it's very clever, and yeah, the slapstick nature of it like makes sense. Like it's goofy, it's funny though, and I mean the great thing about this, like you mentioned, is that just like fits on 2 pages. It's great for a one shot, and you can, everything that you need to know about how to play this game is available in just
you would definitely want some experience playing games though.
Yes.
Speaking
right.
of like a game that this would not be a first game for someone to pick up. There's a lot of like presumed literacy in games that it requires to get a game like this on 2 sheets. But it is fun.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, to zoom back out again, is that like I think that to create a game like this or like any of the other like one pagers or one shots or mini games that we are familiar with, you do have to assume a certain level of literacy by your TTRPG literacy by your audience, because there's no room to explain how to roll dice or the GM's role or what a resolution is or any of the things that are in like a D&D player's manual or that will be in Daggerheart to explain how to play games.
And even coming from D&D, like this assumes that you've played a game where there's not hit points before.
Right.
Like
so this is even beyond that. Yeah.
Combat here is like there's just all you have is sort of like resolution of action, and so you can like attempt violence, let's say, and like the consequence isn't necessarily like hit points. It's like you would cause unintended harm to yourself or to something else, and then it's sort of up to you to figure out what that means. And like, did I kill the guy? Like, there's that. It's a steep hill to climb to pick up a game like this without having played games like this. And I know that that's sort of I mean, I guess I just said like it's known, like it's known. And I think that there is room to be designing games that act like this, that are a little bit more clearly articulated. Even Blades in the Dark, man, I would gut that thing down to 72 tight ass pages.
Yeah. I mean, I love Blades in the Dark, but the more time I spend with it, the more I'm like, I bet we can shave a bunch off of this and it will still work just fine.
Yeah. And, and that's the nature of like, I think that's the nature of some of the more like fun experimental stuff that I see, is that it like just requires a certain literacy to start. I bet you could have somebody who is like an experienced GM could bring on a first time player, and they might actually have an easier time with this than with a D&D that requires like a number of sort of calculations in the head, because this is all just like, it boils the actions down to like a roll and there you go. But it would just require somebody to know what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think the the mechanics are really simple and easy to explain, and I think they make a lot of sense. You know, the goal and the danger, it's very straightforward. The issue arises, and this is not a problem with the game itself, but with like, well, what do I do, or what can I do, or you know, and that's, you know, that's the sort of like eternal challenge. But like, yeah, that's where I guess like player,
even at like a level above that is like, what is a game like this?
right?
Like, how do I do this?
Yes, right, yeah.
I have a friend who, you know, I shared this with because they, you know, we show each other what we're working on, and he was just like, I have never played a game like this. Could I play this with my family? I was like, no, there is not. It's not going to happen, because the very basic, not that they couldn't, but that like to understand that we're going to sit and like riff together, and like that riffing is the game, like that the riffing is the game is like, man, you can describe that so many different ways. You can give it so many different spins in introductions in game books, but like you have to see it to understand it.
Yeah. It's something. It's impossible to communicate, right? Like, or I don't know. I think it's very close to, you can show it, right? You can demonstrate it. You can bring somebody in to it, but you could not describe how a game like this is played. Not very well. It's difficult to sort of like capture the intangible nature of it. Let's talk about Gun Magic Technopop, going up a level, which is a much more ambitious and complicated project than Echo of Ghosts, but with you know, I think some similarities.
Yeah, I mean, Gun Magic Technopop is I really do think the challenge in making it has been figuring out what not to include. You could make, one thing I've realized in doing this stuff is like, you can make a tight game. You can make a tight game that fits on a page by having limited mechanics and descriptive sort of like vibe text written into the description of the game itself. Like you can tie a lot of that stuff together. You can boil things down. But I get really excited about the things on the edge of that, like not just the core central like mechanic that makes a game work, but all the stuff that like sort of that we've been talking about, the stuff that says like, what do I, you know, how do I, what really interests me in game design is coming up with mechanics that aren't just sort of rules for the sake of like operation, but instead sort of feed back into the sort of feeling and meaning and vibe of the game itself. Mm-hmm. That if you could have a rule set that in some ways like can sort of only be used to play this game, I'm not saying that's like ideal at all, but it is the thing that I keep like, I love games where the mechanics of the game are designed for that game specifically. Hopefully they're very easy, they're intuitive, etc., but like they're just built into the game. And like I get excited about things where it's like, okay, what if we had what if each game session ended with like a downtime ritual where your like group of people who are all sort of like metafictional weirdos had like a psychic ritual to like look into the future, and what you see, you know, maybe there's a pick list, maybe there's like a roll, maybe there's just prompts, is like the start of the next session. And like you know, trying to like resolve some of the things that I experience as a GM and a player about like, what am I going to do? Like, how do we keep this moving? How do I like create, how do I act in the moment where I don't know what my actions should be, and sort of build them back into the game as mechanics that are like narrative, derived from narrative and feed the narrative. Man, that's the most fun. It really is. And I think part of the challenge has been, how do I boil that down into a system that will stand on its own legs? Because the more you put in, the more how to put, like, the more knobs you put on a control panel, the more you have to like do to teach mastery. And so by adding complication into like a system, like there's a game Errand that came out recently, and Errand is basically like there's a core game and then there's like procedures, and the procedures are for everything from like picking a lock to like running a bar. The core game is just this thing, right? But then they have all these different procedures that stack on top. And I find that a really fascinating bit of design because it kind of lets you do best of both worlds. You don't have to use any of it. You don't have to use the lock-picking mini game that is given like 2 full pages in the book. If you want to pick a lock, you could roll to do like whatever, dexterity or some shit. But like they have this procedure, and that procedure like really lends itself to the fiction, and it's a little bit like it's like the camera. It's like as making a movie, it's like the rules you have are partly dictating the shots that you're going to see on screen, and like I find that really interesting because it changes the movie you make by determining what you're going to build rules. The rules make you pause. The rules make you like engage with the mechanic and like zoom in on that scene, and like creating those moments is like, okay, what are the shots I want there to be in this movie? I find that stuff so fun.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And this is something that we've talked about a bunch on this podcast, but like we feel that mechanics should, the system should, serve the game itself, right? They need to be driving you towards like whatever goal type of play, they need to facilitate, but also encourage that type of play. And if it's, a strong setting, they need to like work with the setting, and that's all easier said than done, as always. But it's, that's the goal, right? Like you want the tools that you have to, or I guess this is sort of like the inverse of what you're saying. Like the tools sort of like drive the story that you're telling. I mean, it's the same thing, right? You want them to kind of be, you can shoot a sweeping epic on an iPhone, but you'd be better off shooting like a, found footage type of thing with it. And and I guess there's room to play within that, but like it's, it takes pressure off of the players and off of the GM if everything sort of like is driving in the same direction.
Yeah. And I've played games where like rules are fun, and I've played games where rules are tedious. And where a rule is tedious, I don't want to do that action. It's like, oh, I don't want to pick that lock. I've got to like do all, jump through these hoops to play this like tedious mini game. There's a video game, I think, analog in here too. It's just like,
yes.
I'm just going to leave I'm going to leave that chest there. When the thing is fun, it's like, not only do I want to do it, like I want to see that on screen. I want my character to have that moment of engaging with it. And so like I like the idea of fun rules. I like the idea that the mechanics and the actions that I get to take are spark a scene in the mind. If I was a different player or a designer, I can see how all I would need is like I could just build, and maybe maybe this is what I should be doing instead, because it's so hard sometimes. I could just build what's the term of art here? Like not quite a module, like a book with like here's the place and the characters and like all the things you could do.
Yeah, like a setting book, a module. Like
a setting book, right? Yeah, like I get that. I get that. Like maybe that's really what I'm doing, and I'm like forcing mechanics into it at the end of the day.
I mean, we've read I also sometimes dream of, actually I am working on, unfortunately I didn't mean to do this, a system neutral setting book, because the system that it was originally written for is now so outdated that like I need to, I don't want to like adapt it to a new one. So
yeah.
But I mean, like that's the thing. Like I don't know. I think that is like a genuine like point of difficulty. And one thing I think is interesting about Gun Magic Technopop is like, right, there are games that are really, really elegant, wonderful systems. I think of, this is for me a good example, but like Savage Worlds is maybe the only like generic system that I like at all. It has flaws, but I like it. And I think it works really well for not every genre, but lots of genres. Blaze in the Dark is also like a great system, but in terms of like setting and vibes and feel, it is, in my opinion, immaculate. Like I think it's just so well done. And then there's like everything in between, right? Like, and I think like an open question when it comes to game design is like, what's more successful? What do people want? And I truthfully, I think people do want, like, they want vibes, they want setting, they want art, they want to be given something to play in. But I also am like increasingly interested in like, okay, but can we also make a system that works and is fun? Like you mentioned like the lock picking games or whatever, or hacking games and video games. A lot of those suck, and I just skip them. I'm like, I'm not going to bother.
Yep.
Basketball, shooting a basket is fun. People like to do that just for fun. They go and they do that. Rolling lots of dice is fun. Getting a 20 on a D20 is fun. Like,
I don't like rolling a single when I only have, when it's a game where I'm rolling a single die. I don't like it. It has to be more than one in the hand.
One of my
there's an aesthetic appeal.
Yes, exactly. There's an aesthetic. Just like it feels, it sounds good. One of my favorite mechanics in any game is exploding dice in Savage Worlds. Like, it's just like, it's fun. And so you can create, I don't know if like that's something that's like an intangible, but like you can create like a perfectly elegantly designed system. But if it's not fun, then it doesn't matter sort of like how well it works together. So you're getting this right is another one of those like sticky parts of game design. And I do think sort of like one of the enduring appeals of D&D is, it's exciting to get a critical hit. Like it's very fun to get a D20.
Oh yeah.
I personally, this is now a divergence. I really have come to hate D20s in general. I hate the math of them. I don't like the shape of them. Like I
don't like looking at them to figure out the number. It's just slightly too small.
I would rather roll just about anything else, but it is fun. Whatever it's replacing needs to have, or whatever replaces it needs to have, at least as an exciting moment where you get like a rare but very meaningful critical success. Yeah.
I feel like D12 is a really nice thing.
I like a D12.
I think the D12 is a good, is really nice.
Good size.
I'm ready to build solely around D12s. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, so we've talked about this a lot, and I know that Gun Magic Technopop is in progress and you're still figuring it out. But like, I do think, I think you've got something really cool, and both the mechanics and the system are cool. But I, if I understand correctly, like you're kind of stuck on like, is this a setting first? Is this a story that I'm trying to tell? Or like, is this a system for play? And it could be both, but maybe it's not. Like this is genuinely like an open question with a lot of games.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing I keep coming back to is like, I'm sort of winnowing it down where the rules that I'm interested in seeing are rules that encourage setting engagement and investment. And like, I'd like to think of ways to have players invested in NPCs. Like, okay, well, what does that mean about creating NPCs? Like, how do players generate the world that we're playing within, rather than just having the GM be like, this is the opposite, by the way, of a setting book, rather than having the GM, even if it's a pick list on your sheet of like 5 characters that you can bring in at any time. Something where like you're more invested in making these decisions rather than sort of being a passive, like hearing somebody say a name and being like, oh, right, that guy. I'm thinking about like, maybe I want this to be like, you play it and you're done in 7 episodes. Like ending a campaign, I'm an old man now. Seeing campaigns go on forever and ending them is fucking impossible. Like, is there a way to build the game that like resolves that? Like, so part of the thing that is most fun and also most challenging is how wide open the design space is. And like determining what it is, not just what the rule should be, but like what there should be a rule for, and is challenging. I've come very close to having a fully, not just playtestable, but like a fully like, oh, I think I could wrap my hands around the entirety of this game. And then like, no, this is in my limited playtesting. Like, this is not enough. or it's like too much of one thing. I don't know. It's the fun of it. To be honest, there's an aesthetic to making that I care. That's an entirely different conversation.
Well,
making things,
yeah,
deciding things is an aesthetic in and of itself, is a pleasure in and of itself.
It is this. Yeah. Well, there are like three things that I'll have to talk to you about separately because it's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, I mean, there is like a lot of joy in the creating and the designing itself. And I don't know, maybe it's because I spend too much time doing it, but I am an optimist. And I think that there's a really interesting opportunity in tabletop right now to do interesting things, interesting design space.
Yeah.
I think part of that is because there's not enough money in it yet. Like, it's
100%. Yes.
And,
there's not enough money in it. And it also is not expensive to do.
Yes. Right.
It can be expensive to buy a book, but it's not actually expensive to like, other than your own labor to make the thing.
Yeah.
It just requires like a keyboard. It's not expensive to play the thing. It's just dice and people at a table. Like, it's very unique in that way. It doesn't cost money the way video games cost money, neither to produce or consume. It is a shared experience that's like, I don't know. There's a lot about it is that there is not an easy way to make a lot of money off of it that is allowing it to be such a hotbed of exploration of like play and agency that we don't have other analogs for right now. Like, video games are so far gone from that space.
It's interesting because in the early days of video games, they were a little like this. There were a lot of like sort of, I don't know, rebel coders and anarchists and people who made like weird little games. Nobody played because the people who had equipment or knew about video games was, a few dozen people in a few different places around the world. But now it's, even if you could make a game, I mean, you can make. There are still individuals who are making indie games.
They do. It's God bless them.
But it's a real crapshoot, And but yeah, I do think it's also like a fun sort of like multimedia exercise. Like it's writing, but it's also design. It's also a little bit of math. It can be very artistic depending on whether or not you or someone involved is inclined that way. So, but it's also, I think, this is the problem you're running into, and I sympathize with, is like, because it's so open-ended, you can kind of get stuck with the possibilities.
I'll close by saying that I think if you're inclined towards trying it, the best way to start is by hacking something else.
I think that's good advice.
There's a lot that's there. You can get a better feel for like why decisions were made when you start trying to rebuild those decisions than even by playing it. And it's fun.
That's good advice. All right, Eddie, we'll have to have you back. There's a lot more to talk about, but where can people find you if they wanted to do that?
Well, you can find Echo of Ghosts at my itch page, which is andypressman.itch.io.
That's right.
Pressman is with a P.
We'll put this in the show notes too if you check there.
I blow out mics a lot and it sounds like a T, but it's a P like Peter. And on the internet, I've been using my name for so long, unfortunately, that I can't escape from it anymore. So thank you for having me, Rob. This has been a real pleasure.
This is a lot of fun, Andy. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you have questions for me or thoughts or concerns, please let us know on email, Discord, or on Twitter. And whatever you do, keep rolling them dice.
You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you need a wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life.